Okay, so freshman year, I decided to do my NHC topic on the Elaine race riots, and the theme that year was conflict and compromise. So I'm going to explain to y'all what happened and the impact that the Elaine race riots had on America. The Elaine race riots began with the Red Summer, which refers to the summer and fall of 1919, in which race riots exploded in a number of cities in both the North and the South. Wall Street Journal author Cameron Wall explained that despite President Woodrow Wilson's promise to further human rights in the U.S., the federal government turned a blind eye and did little to protect African Americans from racial violence. Elaine, Arkansas is located next to Helena, West Helena, and Phillips County, and in 1919 the ratio of blacks to whites in Phillips County was 9-1. My exhibit, I had a leading up to the riots section, and it came from both the black perspective and the white perspective because they believed two different things led up to the riots. So in 1919, the tension was high between the blacks and the whites after World War I because the blacks were still not being treated equally. Cotton was selling at a record high price, yet the blacks weren't receiving the full market value. A civil rights activist at the time named Ida Wells Barnett explained, "The colored men who went to war for this democracy returned to emancipate themselves from slavery, which took all a man and his family could earn, left him in debt, gave him no freedom of action, no protection for his life or property, no education for his children, but did give him Jim Crow cars and lynchings." As this was occurring, rumors were going around that the blacks in the county were organizing a union, so the white leaders formed a committee to investigate these rumors. At this time, the whites were known as the planters and the blacks were known as the sharecroppers. On September 30th, 1919, Robert Hill, the founder of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America, hosted a meeting at the Hoopsburg Church. At this meeting, the blacks discussed ideas on how to get more money for their cotton. The planters dispatched 3 men to break up the union meeting. The sharecroppers were prepared for trouble, so they assigned 6 men to patrol outside the church. A verbal confrontation led to gunfire amongst the 3 blacks and 6 whites, in which one of the whites was fatally wounded. John Ratliff, a witness to the events, explained, "Firing commenced. The first shots, about 3, are one right after another. As far as I could see, the first shots came from the back end of the car and was raging toward the church. A shootout began amongst the blacks and the whites, and in the end, W.A. Adkins, a white man, was killed in a shootout in front of the church. Many blacks were also killed by gunfire, but the exact number is not known." Frank Moore, a citizen of Elaine, explained that the whites were enraged, so the next morning they sent word to the blacks that they were coming to kill every black that they saw. He continued to say that at about 11:30 that day, there was about 300 to 400 white men armed with guns walking and driving around to kill us because of the death of W.A. Adkins. H.F. Smitty, a white posse member, later explained, "We shot and killed men, women, and children without regard to whether they were guilty or not. Blacks were killed time after time, again out in the fields picking cotton, harming nobody." Governor Breaux of Arkansas immediately sent dispatch for troops. He received confirmation on October 1st that 500 troops with machine guns would be sent to Elaine. After it was all said and done, 122 black men were indicted by the grand jury on charges of going out on the riot, and another 73 blacks were charged with murder. After the jury deliberated for only 8 minutes, 12 of the men were suddenly sentenced to the execution by the electric chair for the killing of 5 white men. Despite the deaths of what are believed to be hundreds of blacks, not a single white person was charged with the crime. The events that occurred not only caught the attention of the NAACP, but also many lawyers in Arkansas, including Scipio Alfrenas Jones. Scipio partnered with Murphy's law firm to get the cases of the 12 men brought back to trial. He worked out an agreement to allow 6 of the men to plead guilty to reduce their sentences. The other 6 were released because of the failure of the state to bring the cases to trial. Within a couple months, all the men had been released in large part because of Scipio's diligence, skill, and persistence. It's predicted that hundreds of blacks died. There was an unknown number because many of the bodies were set on fire and dumped into the Mississippi River. Anywhere between 25 to 856 blacks died, but most sources conclude that the number of blacks dead was 300 to 500. The riots in Elaine are now known as the most deadly conflict in the United States history. Civil rights activist Cameron McWhiter explained, "Many of us trace the civil rights movement back to the Montgomery bus boycott and Rosa Parks' arrest in 1955, but the true beginning may have been during the summer of 1919, remembered as the Red Summer, when race riots erupted across the country." The riots were significant because for the first time in American history, the Supreme Court handed down a verdict favoring the black defendants in criminal cases. For the next several years, the NAACP went on to win many major victories in the Supreme Court that eventually led to the end in legal segregation. As I was researching this topic, I contacted a citizen living in Elaine now, and she said that many people did not know about the riots until historians brought it up several years prior to my research, and so I partnered with a foundation in Arkansas, and we worked to get a monument in Elaine.